Ethnic minority representation is more than just numbers. It's more than just adding numbers into a sector or into a business. It's so much more than that. It's about being able to make a difference, being able to make change, being able to influence decisions. In the time I have with you, I wanted to explore how a lack of ethnic minority representation today has echoes in past racial segregation and racial restrictions in the UK, and it wasn't that long ago. I remember my first experience of racism, and it was linked to a lack of representation. I was 7 years of age in primary school with an afro that belonged in a Jackson 5. I don't know where that's gone, but I loved school, I loved reading, and I was the only black kid in my class. And I can remember coming back after the summer break and coming into school, and teacher sat us all down and said, "We got a new book to read." And I sat there cross-legged, put my milk down to one side, and leaned in. What is this going to be? What book is this going to be about? And teacher put the book in front of us, and it said, Little Black Sambo. And I looked at it and went, as a 7-year-old, what's this going to be about? And for those who haven't come across it, these series of books, and there were loads of them, lots of booklets, they turned into a cartoon and board games, but it was a negative black caricature, a minstrel-type figure. Bug-eyed, huge lips, lived in the jungle with his parents called Mumbo and Jumbo. And I can remember just in one term of these books being released, I went from belonging in the class to not belonging. And my classmates would come to me at break times and say, "You look like the boy in the book. You look like Sambo. I'm going to call you Sambo. Do your parents live in the jungle? Are they called Mumbo and Jumbo? Do you have to dance for your supper?" And I can remember they were being curious, but that curiosity didn't feel good. It felt a bit mean, it felt cruel, but it wasn't on them. I could just feel it. They say that the first time you come across racism, you don't know what it is, but you feel it. And it was sad because these episodes of books that they introduced into schools at that time was the first kind of connection that a lot of children had with black and ethnic minority people. And it was such a negative stereotype. It was a way of sort of like separating you out in class. Like, you guys belong, you guys don't quite belong, know your place. My mum could see me withdrawing from school. And so we had a discussion. I told her about the books. And we went up to school. My mum was going to complain. So we went into the school, and the teacher said, "Well, the books are on the curriculum. No one else has complained. So if you feel that your child is having a bad effect on their self-esteem, I suggest that your child just sits out of class while we read these books." So that's what I did. I sat out on the bench outside of class, and I went from loving reading time to not thinking very much of it. And looking back, I'm thinking about representation. And it wasn't just about the negative stereotype in the book. It wasn't just about that. It wasn't just about Little Black Sambo. It was about the fact that there was a lack of representation on the Parents Teachers Association. There was a lack of representation in the teaching staff. There was a lack of representation in teaching leadership with the folks that set the curriculum at all levels of the primary education system. And over the years, I've looked back at this incident, and I came across a concept that's known as the color bar. And I didn't know much about this, and I read on and did some more research. And the colour bar was a form of racial segregation and a form of racial restriction that existed right up until 1976, before it became outlawed in the UK. It wasn't formal, it wasn't like you see written in law, like in Jim Crow in the southern states of America or apartheid in South Africa. It wasn't written into law. It was informal. And on the basis of your skin, an ethnic minority, you could be refused services. So you could be refused accommodation. You could be refused to be a bank loan if you were going to get some finance to set up your business. You could be refused to be a patron in a hotel, in a restaurant, in a theatre, the cinema. You could be refused entry and service. And Neil Sinclair, who's a local historian in this area, wrote in the Tiger Bay Tales of how the colour bar kicked in when you lived in Tiger Bay over here. You crossed the bridge into Cardiff city centre, and the colour bar would kick in and you would be refused services at certain businesses and establishments. And the colour bar just was in employment too. So I'm reminded of this story of Guy Bailey, 1960s Bristol. Guy Bailey got an interview. He was going to work on the buses. Great, he thinks. Excellent, I've got an interview. Here we go. So he presents himself at the office, and he goes in, and he can see the shock on the receptionist's face. And he sees a reception person go into the back room, and he hears this: "Your 2 o'clock appointment's here, but he's black." And Guy Bailey could also hear the manager saying, "Tell him we have no vacancies." And that's how it went down. Guy Bailey didn't have any opportunity to complain because it was legal, it was lawful. The bus company in Bristol wasn't hiring black and ethnic minority people. And Guy Bailey made it to the interview. For so many people at that time, their name or their ethnicity would flag them, and they wouldn't even get past the shortlisting stage. And it wasn't just about finding employment, it was about progressing in employment too. And I'm reminded of the story of Joseph Luke from Guyana, black guy, working 1960s for British Rail in London, carriage cleaner. And he progressed from carriage cleaner to a van driver, shuttling resources and utilities between the stations in London. He's thinking, great, they're seeing something in me. I'm progressing. My hard work is paying off. But what happened when his new team found out that a black guy was joining their crew? They went on strike with union support until British Rail removed Joseph's promotion. That's how it went down. So, when we're looking at these things, the colour bar essentially pushed black and ethnic minorities into the margins of work, having to take lower wages, precarious working arrangements, not being seen as leadership material, and able to complain. Even if you did, your complaint would not be investigated. The colour bar was a kind of split in society at the time, with a lot of people not wanting to mix races in the workplace. But the majority did and could see the unfairness. And so the colour bar was outlawed in 1976 in the last series of 3 Race Relations Acts, and it got away with the colour bar. But the echoes of the colour bar still exist with us today. We've seen numerous reports and inquiries, the Scarman Review, the Stephen Lawrence Inquiry, 30 years now, the Lammy Review, the Morris Inquiry, the McGregor-Smith Review, the Baroness Casey Review, How many inquiries do we need to see that still say the same thing over and over? We still see racism in society today, and we still see an over-representation of black and ethnic minorities in precarious working arrangements with little or no opportunity for progression, and an underrepresentation in leadership and management positions. So how do we tackle this? Well, the first thing is leaders have got to show up. Leaders set the tone, they set the culture. And it's really important they come forward and own this. And I don't mean reading somebody else's script. I mean actually doing the work and coming to that understanding of what racism is about. And it's also having an anti-racist action plan can be really useful too. And I like an anti-racist action plan. I like anti-racism. It's like a double whammy, a double punch to try and get rid of things. On one side, anti-racism says, we acknowledge that it exists. And secondly, by doing nothing, even though you might not consider yourselves to be racist, by doing nothing, we allow it to continue. And on the other side, it's about being action-orientated to do something about it, to eliminate it, to remove those barriers, looking at practices and processes through an anti-racist lens and removing those things, addressing racial disparities with some positive action. I'm proud to be Welsh. I'm proud to be Welsh because we're the first country, as far as I know, in the world whose government has an anti-racist action plan. The first one. And it was ratified over there in the Senate. Fantastic. And I'm hopeful that this post-George Floyd generation really wants to grapple with this issue. They're showing up, and allies are showing up too. And I really do believe that they'll make this better for the next generation. I'll end by saying this. Racial disparities and racial segregation are still relevant today. And that's why ethnic minority representation is more than just numbers. It's more than just putting people in a sector. It's ensuring that they're able to make change and being able to make an impact. Thank you.